Right. Bertrand Piccard almost died when he was 32. He was in a hang glider somewhere over France. He'd been doing it since he was 16, but that day, the glider broke in midair. If he's with us today, it's because he just managed to open the parachute. It didn't deter him. In 1999, he flew a hot air balloon non-stop around the world. It had never been done before. And it was the longest flight in the history of aviation, both in terms of distance and time. It took him 19 days, 21 hours and 47 minutes. His grandfather was a balloonist, his father a deep-sea explorer. That left space. So as a little boy, Bertrand had a hero. It was Neil Armstrong. But more recently, he has aimed much higher than the moon. He has the sun in his sights, or more precisely, the sun's unlimited energy. In 2003, Bertrand started developing a small solar-powered long-range airplane called the Solar Impulse. In 2012, it completed its first international flight from Morocco to Switzerland. So far, so impressive, but Bertrand has also got a day job. He's a psychiatrist, and he supervises the Swiss Medical Society for Hypnosis. I wonder what his business card says, actually, with all these things going on. So this puzzled me. I wondered, what does psychiatry have to do with flying? How do these two passions fit together? I asked him, and he said, that will be the topic of my speech. Please welcome Bertrand Piccard.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Good afternoon to each of you. Maybe I will start as a psychiatrist and not as a pilot. I'll start with a question. Who are we? Women, yes, of course. Men, a few, yes. Old, young, rich, poor, healthy, sick, whatever. At the end, if we think a little bit more, we're only human beings. We're only human beings who are desperate to find their way through the spirals, the turbulence, the crises, the problems and difficulties of life in order to try to find success and fulfillment. And how do we proceed? Well, we basically look everywhere desperately to find the best tools, the best solutions, the best answers. And in our Western world, what do we find as the best tools to be successful and fulfilled? Well, we find control, speed, power, resistance, fighting. And why that? Well, because we're so much afraid of the future, so much afraid of the unknown, of the question marks, of the doubts, of the unpredictability of life, that we always try to fight our way through the obstacles, to resist to the changes. We want to be stronger than the elements, stronger than the others, stronger than life, in order to go in the direction we have chosen and avoid doubt as much as possible. Well, the reason why I love ballooning so much, it's because ballooning teaches us exactly the opposite. When you're in a balloon, you have no power because you have no engine. You have no control because you go with the wind. And you don't even have your own direction and speed because you go in the direction and the speed of the wind toward the unknown. So a balloon flight is a permanent crisis management. You know exactly where you come from, but you have absolutely no idea where you go to. So if you compare these two visions of life, going with the wind or fighting against life, what can you observe? Well, you can observe that life in general is exactly like the atmosphere. In life, we have winds, the winds of life, who blow in every direction. The trends, fashions, expectation of customers, stock exchange market, globalization, political decisions, economical rules. But of course, also on a personal level, everything like health, sicknesses, accidents, love, failure, crisis. All this is exactly like the wind. It takes us by surprise, without being planned and organized, and pushes us toward the unknown. So of course, if we learn to hate the unknown, the doubts and the unpredictability, our entire life is going to be just a nightmare. But if we learn to love the doubts, to love the question marks, to deal with the unknown, life is going to be a fabulous experimental field where we're going to be able to learn a lot of new tools in order to be much more successful and much more fulfilled. But you can tell me, it's very theoretical what you say, because if the winds don't blow in the good direction, you don't go where you want to go. Well, in the balloon, it's clear that if the winds don't blow in the direction you want to go, you won't go there. But you also learn something much more important. You learn that for each level in the atmosphere, you have a different direction of wind, different layers, which all have a different direction. So when the winds don't go where you want to go, it's completely useless to fight against the winds, to remain on the horizontal level. Your only freedom, your only responsibility actually, is to change altitude, to find a better wind that has a better direction. And I believe in life, it's exactly the same. We have dreams, we have hopes, targets, objectives, visions. But so often the winds don't allow us to find them. So often we have problems, crises, wars, difficulties, and our vision remain in the drawboard instead of being fulfilled. So here also, what we need to do is to stop fighting horizontally against everything that happens, but much more change altitude. Change altitude in our vision of the world, psychologically, professionally, spiritually, philosophically, all the ways possible to change what we believe, change our certitudes in order to be able to take another influence, another idea, another direction that will maybe give us a better trajectory. The problem is that if I was stopping now, you would probably say, why is this guy coming to tell us how to change altitude in the winds of life to have another vision of the world? It's maybe poetic, maybe metaphorical, but still completely useless. So let's try to make it really practical. How do a balloon works to change altitude? If you want to change altitude in a balloon, you have to drop ballast. You have to drop weight, sand, water, all the equipment you don't need anymore, in order to be lighter and be able to climb. And then you go through all these layers of wind, and when you find the good one, you just stabilize the balloon and you keep the good direction. I believe this is what we have to learn to do in life. We have to learn how to change altitude and to drop ballast. Because we have a lot of ballast on board. You cannot imagine how much ballast we have. If we take the checklist of our life and we read under the word ballast, what do we find? Certitudes, habits, safety, convictions, exclamation marks, strategies, paradigms, dogmas, common assumptions. You know, all these things that usually we take in our hands and hold very strongly because we believe they make us stronger. But it's not true, they don't make us stronger, they just make us heavier. And if we want to be able to change altitude, we have to throw that overboard. We have to throw that ballast overboard. And this is very practical. What does it mean? It means that we have to observe very honestly what we deeply believe and try the opposite. Maybe if there is one sentence you can remember from my speech, it could be that one. If you want to be creative, if you want to solve a crisis, if you want to invent a new solution in your life, try to honestly observe what you deeply believe, which are the paradigms on which your strategies are usually based, and try the opposite. I'm not saying the opposite will always be better. What I mean is that instead of being always prisoner of one direction, because we always go with the same way of going through life, instead of just one direction, if we envisage the opposite, we will have thousands of different possibilities, different tools, different strategies in between. And this will be in 3 dimensions. For every level, it will be like this. And if we manage to work out our life with this type of philosophy, what is going to be the future? Well, the future is going to be a firework. It's going to be at every single second of our life, all the different possibilities, all the different roads, all the different directions available to us. And what will be adventure, exploration, entrepreneurship, adventure, creativity, crisis management, because at the end all these words are exactly the same. Well, it will happen each time we manage to explore this vertical axis. Each time we try every way of thinking and behaving until we find the one that leads us in a good direction. And then we follow it for a while until we have to change again. If you imagine the big success in the last 100 years, the big feats of exploration, the big feats of creativity and inventions, what do you observe? Nothing was a new idea. Nothing. Everything was a dream of humankind for thousands of years. To be able to treat the sick people with antibiotics, that was a dream for thousands of years. Landing on the moon, flying, climbing on the highest mountains. It was all dreams of mankind for thousands of years. Why did they happen in the same century? Well, because probably the 20th century is the century where people started to throw ballast overboard. You know, it was not only technology. Yeah, for walking on the moon, yes, it was technology, but not for flying. The first airplane was made out of wood and cloth, which means that the Babylonians and Egyptians could have flown 5,000 years ago, if they had only believed it was possible. But in those days, the common assumption was the fact that the gods only were able or allowed to fly and climb on the highest mountains, and it was prohibited to disturb the gods, so nobody tried. And when people started to try, it just happened. Of course, when you want to try something new, you always have the risk of failing. This is maybe also why so few people take the risk of trying something new. I tell you, when I wanted to fly around the world in a balloon, I announced at the press conference that I was going to stay for 2 weeks in the jet streams, 10,000 meters above the ground, and after 6 hours, I was down in the water. So it's true that failure is sometimes a possibility. But if you stop at this moment, it will be a failure. If you continue, it will be one more step to success. And what is really interesting when you fail is to understand how many people are delighted. How many people are relieved. You know, all these people who take all their energy to fight against life, to fight against new things. They make beautiful protection walls around them to keep their certitudes, to keep their habits, to resist to change. And when you fail, these people think, I am right not to try. And when you succeed, it's very paradoxal. A lot of people are afraid because suddenly they start to say, I should maybe have tried. And the role of the pioneer is quite paradoxal. First, we want to make impossible things, and people tell you you're completely crazy. Then you fail, and most of the people are happy. And when you succeed, people say, oh, he has done it. It means it's easy. Well, it's not always so easy. On this picture, my goal is not to show you the smile of Brian Jones and I after we got out of the capsule of the balloon after 20 days around the world. No, the goal is to show you how much gas was left in that fuel tank. We had 32 fuel tanks, like the one you see on both sides of the capsule. We had 3.7 tons of liquid gas when we took off. We had 40 kilos when we landed. And this 40 kilos was not a good calculation. It was just the miracle that the winds were strong enough to bring us to success instead of having us ditching in the Atlantic Ocean. So on that day, I made another promise to myself. I had made the dream of the first part of my life, and I thought I was far too much dependent on fossil energy. My success was only due to the 40 kilos left in the fuel tank. And I made the promise that the next time I would fly around the world, it would be with no fuel at all. It would be independent from fossil energy. Completely crazy dream, but everything starts with a crazy dream. It should not remain a crazy dream. It should then become a project. And I think it became a project when the capsule of my balloon was brought to the Smithsonian Air and Space Museum in Washington. Together with the airplanes of Charles Lindbergh, Chuck Yeager, the Wright brothers, capsule of Apollo 11. And it was so incredible to see that that was at the end of 1999. The world had been conquered everywhere. South Pole, North Pole, Everest, Marianas Trench, even to the moon. What was left for pioneering spirit? what was left for exploration? Well, I think it's obvious that if the world has been conquered, the quality of life on this planet has not yet been conquered. And this is the next level. This is maybe the challenge for pioneers and explorers in the 21st century. Quality of life, human rights, fighting poverty, medical research, renewable energies, energy efficiency, sustainability, protection of the environment. All these things where nobody has managed to really solve the issues in the last century. So now, maybe this is where we can be pioneers. This is where we have to drop the ballast that we have, drop the old strategies that did not work, and try to change altitude to find better directions. And I started to really dream about a solar airplane who could fly forever, who would use the best technologies of today, and show that this huge gap between the protection of the environment, who is very often boring and expensive, and the industry, who is very often polluting, can be solved. Because today we have clean technologies that can at the same time protect the environment and create jobs, make profit, sustain growth. And only this type of technologies can make the impossible happen, like having an airplane flying day and night with absolutely no fuel. So this is how Solar Impulse was born. But you can tell me, yeah, solar airplanes. We have solar airplanes since 30 years, and that's true. But they were limited to daylight. When there was a cloud, they had to land. When there was night, they had to land. So they showed the limits of renewable energy much more than the potential. If you want to show the potential, you need to stay in the air day and night. You need to be able to store enough energy to spend the night and continue the following day. And we knew it was possible with remote control models. This is possible. 4-meter wingspan, remote control. You can have these models fly day and night on solar power. But it's not worth a speech. It's not worth a big adventure. There is no human being inside who can be an identification for students, for children, and so on. So I wanted, of course, to have a pilot on board. But if you put a pilot, it's not 4-meter wingspan anymore. It is 64-meter wingspan. It's the wingspan of an Airbus 340 for the weight of a small car. If it's heavier than a small car, it will touch the ground before the end of the night, because the sink rate will be too high. So something considered to be completely impossible, the size of an Airbus 340 for the weight of a small car, everybody told us it was simply impossible. Don't even think about it. In the aeronautical world, of course, because they are big specialists, and they know that it's impossible, of course. Well, when you see the list of our partners, beside Dassault, who is an advisor, not really a partner of ours, but an advisor in this project, all the other companies do not come from the world of aviation. It means they did not know it was impossible. They wanted to try. They wanted to help us. On one side, you have the pure technological companies like Altran, who is providing engineers in this project since the beginning to solve impossible problems. On the other side, you have companies like Clarins. Clarins, who just has the passion for responsibility toward the future and is supporting us because they fell in love with that project. This allowed us to have a team, but the team had to build this airplane not with specialists of aeronautic, but with a shipyard. People making boats. And it's so interesting to see that when we speak about innovation, innovation does not come from the system itself. It comes from the outside. It's not the people who were selling candles who invented the light bulb. It's only people who can drop ballast and change altitude. And this is actually how this airplane was born. People bringing complementary, completely diverse experiences and having this airplane able to fly day and night. So you can imagine that an airplane like this, taking the sun during the day to load the batteries and run his electrical motors, can climb to a maximum altitude like 9,000 meters, 27,000 feet, but then it has to go through the night. If it's too heavy, if the pilot is wasting its energy, if the technology is not optimized, the plane will crash short of batteries. But in our world, if we don't work on sustainability, on new technologies, on renewable energies with a pioneering spirit, we will also never give the planet to the next generation without a major disaster. So you see that it's really just an example of the mindset we should have if we want to go into the future with a pioneering spirit. This allowed us to be invited in a lot of different countries to promote these new technologies in Paris Air Show, crossing the Mediterranean to support in Morocco the construction of the solar power plant of the King Mohammed VI, crossing the United States this year from San Francisco to New York. And it could be André, my partner, André Borschberg flying, it could be me flying. The goal was always to try to mobilize the awareness of the media, because when you want to speak about sustainability, you want to speak about protection of the environment, nobody really cares if it's not spectacular. When you arrive with a solar-powered airplane, you have 150 journalists for each landing, and then you can start to spread your message about energy, about technology, about sustainability for the future. So it allowed us to touch different people from the political world. It's always very frustrating with presidents because you take weeks to meet them and then they change. With more stable people like in the IMF, like some monarchies, Ban Ki-moon at the United Nations, you have the impression that you can really start to make a difference, because most of the people who have power in this world are desperate to get good arguments to try to convince the one who want to resist against changes, the one who want to keep the statu quo, the one who believe that nothing can be made better in this world. So bringing new solutions, trying to inspire people was extremely important for André and I. But mostly, of course, for everybody. We were so interested to see how many people came to see this airplane just saying thank you. It was strange for us. Thank you for what? We started to ask them, and they said, well, we live in a world with bad governance, with crisis, with problems, no hope, and you show solutions, and you show a spirit that we like to follow. And this is maybe when this project started to be much more a philosophical and psychological project than just a technological project. Because at the end, whoever we are, we're a little bit like on this picture here. That's actually the last picture I did with Brian Jones in the balloon flight around the world. It's a window of our capsule. It's frozen by the moisture of the night. And on the other side, you have a rising sun. Of course, if you want to reach the rising sun, first you have to cross the ice. And so many people are afraid to cross the ice. So many people have learned that it is better to suffer in the ice they know, rather than to take the risk of going through the ice to find what there is on the other side. So pioneering spirit is not to fly on the moon or to fly with a solar-powered airplane or to explore the oceans. Pioneering spirit is everything we have to develop in life if we want to be successful and fulfilled, if we want to be able to go through the crisis, through the difficulties, through all the challenges we face every day. And this makes the adventure worth living it. So you see that it's something that has nothing to do with intellectual decisions, intellectual thoughts or calculations. It's something that has to do with emotion, something that has to do with intuition, that means with the right part of the brain. This is where women are probably much better than men. Men want to rationalize with the left brain. Let's try to use the right brain a little more. And in terms of emotion, in terms of intuition, it's not my words I want to use to finish this talk. I just want to show a 2-minute film that summarizes what we've done with Solar Impulse. But I have one request. Please, don't look at the screen as a screen. Look at it as a mirror. You will see our team at work. You'll see some of the successes we had. Try to use it as a mirror to see your vision, your goals, to see where you would like to change altitude and where you would like to drop ballast. Like this, the trajectory will most probably be much better. Can you please run the film?
The first airplane to fly. The first to cross the Atlantic. The first to break the sound barrier. The first to fly day and night without fuel.
3, 2, 1, go! We made it, guys!
We made it! Absolutely unbelievable.
It's designed to slowly ascend throughout the day, charging its batteries.
When I was a child, I saw my father diving to the deepest point in the ocean with the US Navy. That was actually my first inspiration. And today, with scientific exploration, I want to inspire others to also achieve the impossible, thanks to pioneering spirit.
I've been educated at MIT, and this time spent in Boston led me to found startup companies. I know that dreams fuel innovation, and I also know that human commitment and new technologies can really change the world.
In a spirit of exploration, Solar Impulse intends to achieve the first ever round-the-world flight powered by solar energy.
It's amazing, just amazing.
Inspiring new generations, bringing innovative solutions to the challenges of humanity, inventing a brighter future. And you, would you like to be a part of it?
I wish you a very good adventure in the winds of life. Good luck.
That was fabulous again. I'm afraid we're out of time. I just wanted to have one preview before you come back next year and give us another inspiring talk. What's the next thing you want to accomplish?
Well, the next thing is to fly around the world.
With
And
this plane?
With this plane. So with the same principle, we're now building another airplane with a larger cockpit that has autopilot. The pilot can sleep on board, have toilets, watertight wings to fly in bad weather. The first one is only a prototype for good weather. And in 2015, we plan to fly around the world.
I look forward to it. Thank you very
Thank you.
much. Bertrand will be available